I'm going to show you how to find the slope of a line passing through 2 points. Here's my first example. The first thing I usually do is I write down what slope is. So I'm going to put down slope is a ratio, a comparison of two things, something we call rise and run. And instead of writing the word slope, I could actually put the letter M, because they're the same thing. So when I see the letter M, that means to me it's slope. So the slope is this ratio, rise over run. So what I do is I draw a right triangle to join these 2 points that I identify on my line. And the way you draw the right triangle is you could draw it this way. So I can draw this right triangle. To get from this point to this point, I can go right and up. Another triangle I can draw is this triangle here as well. I can go up and then right. So it doesn't really matter which one you use because you'll end up with the same answer. So let's find the slope of this line. So what I usually do is write this out, and now I have to identify what is the length of the rise. Well, the rise is basically the length of the vertical side of my triangle that I drew. And I can see here that this length is actually the same length as this over here. So from here to here, I can see that I only have to move up 1. So the rise here is equal to 1. And I can replace this with 1. So that's the actual length of the rise. And then the run, I do the same thing. I find out what is the length of this side, the horizontal side of my right triangle. And I can see that the length of this side corresponds with these two numbers. And to get from here to here is just 2 spaces. I go over 1, 2. So the run is equal to 2. And I replace that in the denominator of the rise over run. And that would be my slope. The only extra thing that I have to pay attention to if I use this method to find the slope is I have to pay attention to the type of slope it is. Now when you read a slope on a graph, you always read it like you read a sentence, from left to right. So what I do is I imagine something walking across this line from left to right. And I can see from left to right that the turtle is going up. And that lets me know that this is a positive slope. So if from left to right is increasing, going uphill, that is called a positive slope. And since my slope is positive, then my answer should also be positive. So your slope, which is this type of slope, positive, should match the numerical value. So positive slope, positive answer. Let's look at this example here. So again, I'm going to start off with my slope equal to rise over run. And I have to find each length. So I can see in this problem that if I try to draw a right triangle, it's not possible because to get from this point to this point, I just have to go to the right too. So the only thing present here is this would be the run. I have no rise. I don't have to go up or down to get to this point. So I couldn't draw a right triangle. So what I'm going to do is just substitute the length of this side, which is the run, in place of the ratio here. So I can see that from here to here is the same distance as from 1 to 3, which is just length 2. It goes 1, 2 spaces over. So that's my run. So I substitute 2 in here. And then the rise, I can see I did not go up or down. So what value represents going up or down, or not going up and down at all? Well, that would just be 0. And if I were to simplify this, 0 divided by 2 is just 0. And when I'm trying to figure out the type of slope for this, how to name it, I can see that if I were to walk across here, I can see that I'm not increasing, meaning I'm not going uphill, or I'm not going downhill. I'm just going straight across. Since there is no change in going up or down, that means that it's like neutral. And the value that represents neutral would be a 0. So we call this one a 0 slope. And notice that a 0 slope, which is a horizontal line, has value 0. It is neither positive nor negative. In this example, I do the same thing again. So I put m equals rise over run. And remember, m just means slope, so my slope is rise over run. And I just got to find my two values. What is the rise? What's the run? So I would draw my triangle. So in this case, I'm going to use this triangle here. I go right and then down. And now I'm going to identify the length of each one. So the rise, which is the length of this side, it goes up 1. So I put down 1 for the rise. And again, this length corresponds with this length here. So I can see to get from 1 to 2 is just one space apart. That's the same length as this. And then the run is this length here, and this length corresponds with these two numbers. So these are 2 units apart. So I'll put a 2 here, and that will be the value of my slope. Now, one thing I have to remember to do again is evaluate or imagine someone walking on this line. So walking downhill from left to right is going down, and since this is decreasing or going down, that lets me know that the name of this slope is called a negative slope. Since this is a negative slope, then my answer here has to be negative. They have to match. So since right now it's a positive, I can fix it by putting a negative sign in there. So a negative number for my slope lets me know that this is a negative slope. So make sure that these two match. Negative slope, negative number. And then lastly, in this example, I'll set it up the same way. My slope is rise over run. And now I'm just going to substitute each value by finding the lengths. And I can see from looking at this picture that there is no run. It's just a rise. And I can see that to get from this point to this point, I just go up. And since there's no run, I'm going to put the value for the run as 0. And again, this is the rise. The rise is the length of the vertical. So this is 2 is my length. So this length corresponds with these two numbers, and I can see that these are 2 units apart. So this would be 2. And now in this case, if I'm dividing by the number 0, that is actually undefined. So if you're trying to find the slope of a vertical line, we call that an undefined slope. And if you try to imagine someone walking on this line, well, from left to right order, you can't. You can see that they would be falling down. You cannot walk on this. So remember, if you're finding the slope and you get a positive answer, then we know that the graph should look something like this. And we call this a positive slope. If I were to get a negative answer like negative 1/2, my graph should look something like this. And this one is called a negative slope. If it comes out to be 0, then that means my graph should look something like this. And I call this one a 0 slope. And then lastly, if I'm being asked to divide some number by 0, we get a graph like this. And we call this one the undefined slope. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and leave a comment.